My name is Steve Nowicki. I'm a professor of biology at Duke University. Let me begin by reading a quote from a famous book. The science of biology has enormously expanded. Our realization of the nature of life, our knowledge of its processes has been changed, deepened, and intensified. A great and growing volume of fact about life as it goes on about us and within us becomes available for practical application. But this new material is still imperfectly accessible to ordinary busy people. It's embodied in scientific publications, in a multitude of books. It's expressed in technical terms that have yet to be translated into ordinary language. It's mixed up with masses of controversial matter and with unsound and pretentious publications. So in the care of his health and the conduct of his life, the ordinary person draws far less confidently upon the resources of biology than he might do. He's unavoidably ignorant of much that is established and reasonably suspicious of much that he hears. That statement almost perfectly describes the situation we find ourselves now in the second decade of the 21st century. But remarkably, that was written 90 years ago, and by, of all people, the novelist H.G. Wells. The quote is taken from the introduction to a remarkable book published in 1929 that Wells wrote with the renowned biologist of the day, Julian Huxley, and in fact with his own son, G.P. Wells, who was also a biologist. He titled that book, The Science of Life. We typically think of H.G. Wells as a writer of science fiction, books that he wrote, such as The Invisible Man or The War of the Worlds. But in fact, in his day, Wells was a well-known public intellectual, and at that time known for works of satire, of biography, and of history. A decade earlier, for example, Wells had published a monumental tome called Outline of History, in which he described the history of the planet from what was known at that time about even the origins of the solar system all the way up through the First World War, including geological history, what was known about biological evolution, until that monumental social event that Wells saw as being a real turning point in the evolution of human cultural history. As with his Outline of History, Wells intended The Science of Life to be read by common, ordinary people, professionals, leaders in government and industry, just people who are curious about how life works. Wells' motivation was simple. He saw the social and economic and even the political significance of biology as being huge in his day, 90 years ago. And he thought it was important for common, ordinary people to understand something about it. So he set out in the task to put this in simple terms, this understanding that he had at the time, that they had at the time, of biology. At that time, there was indeed a rapid advance in knowledge, a huge expansion of publications, the division of biology into subdisciplines, and in fact, the growing use of jargon that became inaccessible to ordinary people as they tried to understand it. Approaching a century later, we now find ourselves in the same position as Wells found himself back in the 1920s. Our knowledge of biology is exploding exponentially. Our ability to synthesize this is becoming more and more difficult, and our ability to convey it to common, ordinary people is even more of a challenge. Just think for a second about how biology affects us, almost on a day-to-day basis, even on a moment-to-moment basis. Consider going into a supermarket. All of the foods that we might eat, that we might buy there, almost all of them, have been modified in some way by humans to make them more palatable, to make them easier to store or to ship, to make them grow more efficiently so they can be produced more economically. In former times, this would be done very gradually by farmers who chose which plants or animals to breed through artificial selection. But nowadays, we can simply go and insert a gene or two into any organism to change it in a way that we find more attractive or more variable. What do we think about when we walk into that supermarket? Do we think about what we've done with those organisms and what it might mean to our lives? Consider healthcare. The drugs, vaccines, medical procedures, medical devices that help us live healthier, longer lives. Of course, since the advent of modern medicine, Our expanding knowledge of biology has helped us learn how to cure diseases, develop new vaccines, create new medical treatments, and so on. And it's simply the fact that, quote, ordinary busy people would do well to understand more about biology as they make their own choices about healthcare. Choices that are as simple as walking into a pharmacy and deciding which product to buy off the shelf, or choices that can be as complex as deciding which course of treatment to take with a more serious condition. And now that we can sequence genomes relatively quickly and cheaply, we can target therapies for things like high cholesterol or particular kinds of cancers to fit your own personalized genomic profile. The genomics revolution has created all sorts of new ways in which biology impinges on our lives, ways that actually can be quite good, and maybe some ways that aren't so good, or that are even a little scary. For example, you can send a sample of your saliva off to a genetic testing company and get back a report that tells you about dozens of traits that sample, the DNA in that sample, says about you. For example, whether you can smell asparagus, whether you'll find cilantro distasteful, whether you'll suffer from seasickness, or even, remarkably, whether you're afraid of public speaking or afraid of heights. You can also learn something about your personal ancestry, really a timeline and a map of where your ancestors a couple of hundred years ago came from. That same saliva sample can tell you more serious things about yourself. For example, your likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes or certain forms of cancer later in life. But how do you interpret this information? What do you do with it if you don't really understand what that test is about, what that test can and can't really tell you? This is another perfect example of why biology is so important in our everyday lives. Here's another example. Scientists are developing a way to sample DNA from human remains that are thousands of years old. Samples that are telling us about the origins of our own species, how we moved out of Africa, how our progenitors moved across the planet, dispersed, intermingled, getting at the very nature of who we are as a species. Now think about this. That same saliva sample that you might send off to see something about your genetic characteristics, it's now in the hands of a corporation, or it might get into the hands of a government agency. That sample is your barcode. It's all about you. It could be used for good, but what if it falls into the wrong hands? Genetic privacy has become a major issue in our modern day society. Finally, very recently, the development of incredibly accurate and fast and relatively cheap ways to modify DNA has taken our thinking about genetically modifying organisms, GMOs, to dizzying new heights. A decade ago, for example, people, corporations, government agencies were wrestling with issues about whether we should, for example, genetically modify a salmon so that it grows faster and thus becomes a more efficient source of raising food. Nowadays, the tables have turned. We're talking about whether we should genetically modify ourselves, change the genetics of a baby. Whatever one thinks about this issue, it's an excellent example of how common, ordinary people, as H.G. Wells called them, need to understand something about biology so they can be part of the debate, so they can be informed citizens, informed voters, informed consumers. I could go on and on about the many ways that our expanding understanding of biology and our ability to manipulate living systems is impacting our lives, but I'll end with just one more. Whether it's tinkering with the genomes of specific species, or transforming large swaths of land through agriculture or urbanization, or modifying the atmosphere, humans are changing the planet. Global change is not something that H.G. Wells would have thought about 90 years ago, but it's all around us now. It's apparent, it's happening, it's here. How we humans are going to manage and adapt to global change is something that's going to require insight and understanding from across the disciplines, from humanities to the physical sciences. But there's no question that biology is going to play a central role in that discussion. I've been talking about the importance of biology, but like the title of H.G. Wells' book, I really should be talking about the science of life. This is because biology is inherently a multidisciplinary game. It requires people working on small scales to large scales, using insights from a full range of the sciences. It's really hard to even refer to biology as a single discipline anymore. For example, at a very small scale, my biologist colleagues may be working on the molecular mechanisms that control the expression of a single protein. Or they may equally well be working on a global scale, looking at how nutrients are distributed and move around entire ecosystems. My colleagues may work on how a single cell, a fertilized egg, transforms over developmental time into a big, complex organism. Or they may be equally interested in how a single species, over evolutionary time, is transformed into an array of species. Some of my colleagues who are biologists may equally well call themselves chemists, or physicists, or anthropologists, or engineers. This is all to say that biology is a very big tent, vastly bigger now than it was in H.G. Wells' day. The range of levels of organization at which questions can be and need to be asked, and the diversity of techniques and methods brought to answering those questions in biology is what makes that subject so fun and so challenging. It's also what's made biology, broadly speaking, the science of life, such a powerful way to understand the world around us, and in fact, to understand ourselves.